the way photography renders the world. And especially for me, traditional photography, it's about roundness, it's about volume, it's about the ability to create the illusion of air and space in an image that's only a few 10,000ths of an inch thick. These illusions are so important, and many times I think people, in pursuit of creating the sense of reality in a photograph, they sharpen things too much, they print with too much contrast, they overdo things. It's just human nature. So it takes time to develop a relationship with your materials. It takes time to develop a photographic vision and voice. I love all types of photography, but my passion today, and for nearly 4 decades, has been the traditional photographic print, a silver gelatin, tactile experience of light-sensitive emulsion, filled with magic, filled with alchemy. For 13 years, I used one particular black and white film. For more than 2 decades, I used primarily one photographic paper. I know those tools very well. I have concern at how rapidly digital technology is evolving. I hope that those practitioners that are in love with that aspect of the medium are taking time to learn the subtle nuances, the things that cannot be measured with a spectrophotometer, the things that cannot be a part of a profile for a printer, those intangibles that make up the real heart and soul of a photograph. I have a phrase I coined a number of years ago: process film with precision, print with compassion. When I expose the negative until I turn on the white lights in the fixer, I don't know what I have, so I don't want to introduce variables. I try and be as precise as possible. In the darkroom, when I'm printing that negative, I have a variety of tools at my disposal. I don't use those. I use judgment. I'm very careful. I try and be precise, but I try and work in an intuitive basis. I let each print lead on the journey to the final destination, the finished, successful print. The darkroom is indeed a place where magic occurs. There are devices that are involved in this process. We have an enlarger that holds the negative. We project light through it, focus it onto the paper, where the paper is held by an easel. And that, in and of itself, is a wonderful place for creativity. We can lighten, we can darken. We call it dodging and burning. It is like an orchestration. It's like a dance. It's a wonderful experience to be involved in. Then we take that paper, once it's been exposed, and we immerse it in the developer, sometimes known as the soup. And watching that image appear under the dim glow of the safe light is an unforgettable experience. I've seen it literally hundreds of thousands of times over many years. And not every sheet of paper is one you remember, but when you really look down and watch it, it is still magic. I even know a little bit more about how it works today, but it's still magic to me. Then we take it into a chemical, basically vinegar, some acetic acid, where the development stops. Then we put it into a bath called fixer. And what that does is it fixes it so it will no longer be light sensitive. After an appropriate amount of time in there, we can turn on the white lights. And when a print meets your expectation, when that white light comes on, when it's your photograph, and it's what you want it to be, or on those rare occasions where it exceeds your expectation, it just hits you right here. It's a real experience that you'll never forget. Once we've looked at the photographs under the white light and we've had the excitement of a successful photographic print, along with a number of failures, but I don't think of them as failures. I think of them as investments. And sometimes you have to try a few different routes before you find out where you're really going. And then you have this piece of paper that's wet. It's very fragile. But with experience, you can actually handle it quite successfully. You don't want to crimp it. You don't want to scratch it, because that would impair the integrity of the beautiful silver gelatin surface once it's air dried. We go and we put some toning. Many photographers use a selenium toner that imparts greater permanence to the image and also gives an illusionary added depth or third dimension to the image. The prints have to be washed to a state of archival permanence. So we use archival print washers. It takes a fair amount of time, a few chemicals beforehand to get the harmful chemicals out of the photographic paper. And then the drying is very simple. They're dried face down on some fiberglass window screens, and they just air dry. One of the challenges for a lot of printmakers is that the wet print will be a little bit lighter, especially in the highlights and the middle values, than the dry print. We call this dry down. So with experience and keeping your antenna up, you can predict this. But you don't know what you really have until you're actually looking at the dry prints, usually the next day. So by the nature of the process, it's a slow, contemplative process, and I like that. Well, I'm fortunate to live where I do, not far from the coast of the Monterey Peninsula. It's a spectacular stretch of the California coastline from Monterey Bay to Big Sur and south. One of the most notable and recognizable areas for photographers of this coastline is Point Lobos, made famous by not just Edward Weston, but also his son Brett Weston, because they worked there in a contemporary fashion. But one of my favorite beaches to photograph, to explore, is Weston Beach, named after the great photographer Edward Weston, whose photographs of the rocks on that beach are some of the most memorable images in his incredible body of work. Photography, from making the exposure to the final viewing experience, is filled with magic. It also can be filled with pitfalls. Today, as technology is evolving and we're experiencing images using different types of devices, from iPads to high-resolution monitors to flat panel displays, sometimes people overlook the simplicity, the elegance, and the unique experience of the print. I also find photographers whose destination is the print, but they don't make a print until they think they've made all of the aesthetic decisions. They've got their monitor profiled. They've got everything they think calibrated, but it's a different experience. I recommend, if your destination is a print, print early in the process. It need not be 30 by 40 inches, even if that's the final destination. It can be a small print. But once you hold that piece of paper, once you look at it as a print, you will see it differently, and then you can make additional decisions. You should print regularly in the process. It should be an evolutionary process. And when you get the first finished print, then you do something that traditional photographers have done for a long time. You live with it. And then maybe you go back and you reinterpret it based upon that experience of the photographer communicating with their own print.